What's up, guys? Good evening and welcome along to the show. Thanks for coming back. A non-F1 weekend this weekend, so I hope you all managed to fill your time with something motorsport related maybe, or did you just have a weekend off? I'd love to know. Anyway, this show is back as ever, so thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. We've got lots to talk about. When I put the message or the call out for questions from you guys, as I always do, almost 100% of them, I mean, I would say well over 90% of them were all centered around the news that broke on Friday of Honda announcing that they are quitting Formula One at the end of 2021. Bit of a bombshell. I don't think people saw it coming necessarily. I think some people saw it coming to some extent, but I don't think they saw this hard out that we've seen in such a relatively short period of time. Thank you for letting me know the sound is all good. Appreciate it. So, we're going to talk about that because loads of questions came around that subject. So many of them. So keep them coming in on the chat. We will discuss all of those. To those of you who are saying, did you see what happened in the FIA karting? I absolutely did. Alex Costa's disgraceful scenes. I'm sure you've all seen it. It's gone all across Twitter, hasn't it, today? So I'm just going to turn my telly down because I think I've got echo in this room here. So I did see the scenes. They are disgraceful. Idiotic thing to do. This is the world final, the world championships for these kids. This is make or break time in their careers, and yet one of them does something so idiotic, violent. No place for it. I hope he gets a lengthy ban. I've seen lots of talk about the fact that it was his dad was the guy that steamed in and started, piling in on a fight afterwards. If that's true, and he's also the owner of the kart circuit, I hope he gets a lengthy ban as well. There is no place for that kind of violence in motorsport. Incidentally, that comes under the banner of Felipe Massa these days, who's in charge of the FIA's karting commission. He was actually there at the weekend, so that will come under his remit, and he will have to come down very, very hard and make a big example of those guys, I'm sure. So hopefully he will, but no place for it at all. Not a kid, he's 23. It makes no difference what age he is, does it, at the end of the day? If he's 23 or whether he's 12, it makes no difference. There is no place for it at all. Anyway, let's park that one up because I don't know any of the details about it. I've seen the clips like we all have, but that's as much as I know. So all I've seen is that it was disgusting. There's no place for it, and it should be stamped out, and I hope it will. So there's no point in really commenting too much until we know what Felipe Massa and the FIA are going to do about it. But the next few days, I'm sure, and weeks will tell us more. Anyway, let's get back to Formula One and specifically your questions. This is what this is all about. We are going to start with a question which I think is probably the one that's been on lots of people's lips since the announcement. Okay, we're going to go with this one, starting with this one from Helga Kuistra, who says, how sincere is Honda with their statement about the energy transition as a cause to leave Formula One? Honda keeps providing engines for the much more polluting IndyCar and other series. It seems more of a cost-driven choice. So let's discuss that. It does kind of seem to contradict each other, doesn't it, those two statements? Honda's statement, in fact, I've got it up here. Where is it? Honda's statement was very much about the idea that the reason they're pulling out was, at least in a huge chunk, to do with the fact that they want to move towards carbon neutrality in 2050. They want to move within their own organisation towards battery electric vehicles and towards fuel cell vehicles, which they see are the cornerstones of that, of being able to achieve that carbon neutrality. So it says that, where is it? It says that the automobile industry is undergoing a once in 100 years period of great transformation, so Honda has decided to strive for the realisation of carbon neutrality in 2050. This goal will be pursued as part of Honda's environmental initiatives, which is one of the top priorities of Honda as a mobility manufacturer. Right, let's pick that apart. So now clearly Formula One is a very, very expensive business. I mean, there is no doubt, no point in pretending that it isn't. So the cost of entering Formula One has to be a massive part of this. Now, if you're Honda, and you use Honda because they're obviously the example right now, but this could be applied to any automotive manufacturer really. The automotive industry is at the moment moving away from internal combustion engines. We've gone through this hybrid era that we're still in, and Formula One has been at the forefront of that, developing some incredible power units, which should be celebrated because the achievements that Formula One, including Honda, have gone through in this realm of hybrid combustion power units is incredible. You know, over 50% thermal efficiency now, which is mind-boggling and unheard of, unthought of before Formula One took this challenge on of developing these things. So that's a huge, achievement for Formula One. But moving forward, the hybrid era was really a kind of interim phase, wasn't it, before we found whatever was next. I still don't think we've actually found whatever's next, but the closest next thing to achieving carbon neutrality at the moment is either fuel cell vehicles or battery electric vehicles. And at the moment, because battery electric has at least got a bit of a foothold, and there is technology that's, doing wonders in cars right now, the automotive industry is ploughing into that with a huge amount of resource. Doesn't mean that's the only solution. There are other solutions that are coming, and in the background, fuel cell is another one. Hydrogen, of course, in different forms is another solution. So automotive manufacturers have to weigh up what is this astronomical cost of being involved in Formula One against what they get out of it. So what do they get out of it? If you're Honda, what do you get out of investing that much money in Formula One? You get some technology transfer, and you can argue that over the past few years they will have had some technology transfer that actually will benefit them into the future through their work with the MGUs that will absolutely feature on the next generation of road cars, or even the current generation of road cars. So they take some technology transfer. Marketing, they may get some marketing out of it. Of course they get some marketing, but how much? Unless you're a Mercedes, unless you're dominating and winning the championship, how much can you really market successfully off the back of entering Formula One? So if you're not Mercedes, if you're not winning, the marketing side versus the cost has got to be questionable. And if you're looking to commit to this project of Formula One for the next 5 years at least, well, how much technology transfer that's going to be relevant to you as an automotive industry that's moving in a very different direction is there going to be? So from that perspective, you can look at Honda's decision and say, I totally get it. I totally understand why they have done that. To bring up Helga's point there, though, they have just recently committed to IndyCar's hybrid program into the future. Now, Helga says, is that sincere then? Is that sincere that Honda are pulling out Formula One because of environmental reasons? I think it is. I don't think one has to contradict the other. The point is, what's the point in putting hundreds of millions into two premier motorsport categories where they're both operating hybrid power units, if that's not the direction as an organisation you want to go? Keeping your hand in one of those absolutely makes some sense, but take out those hundreds of millions you must be spending on Formula One and plough it into the direction your organisation's going. And the other thing to point out for that, Helga, is that the North American side of Honda's motorsport operation is actually run by a completely different company. So actually it's not governed by those in Japan that govern the Formula One project. So it is a slightly more complex decision process, and they're not necessarily as interlinked as you might imagine. So that's the first point, and let's get your thoughts on this. And we've got loads more to cover around this Honda and Red Bull situation. What are you saying about, lots of people saying bring back the V8s and bring back the V10s. I expected that. Let's see. So Pete Thomas, for example, says 99% of the pollution is shipping the teams and cars around the world. Absolutely. So that's a big part of it. Now, what Honda said in their statement was they want to move towards carbon neutrality by 2050. That's not just about their engines, that's about them as a company, as an organisation. So Formula One is not in any way an environmentally friendly operation to be part of. There is pollution at every step of the way. Now, yes, we have a hybrid power unit, but that's a tiny part of the overall pollutants that Formula One contributes. So Formula One's not an environmentally friendly initiative to be ploughing that much money into. So that's just another example of why you can see Honda want to back out of this. Okay, Honda's excuse is balls, says Bahamutiamat. I don't think it is balls. Why do you say, I mean, come back to me on that one. Why do you think it's bullshit? I mean, why? Tell me. If you're using that as an argument like Helga does to say, well, if they're competing in IndyCar, why would they give up on Formula One? Well, I think I've just explained that. You know, you don't want everything, your entire motorsport investment, which is huge from an organisation like Honda, all going into hybrid, because it makes no sense when the organisation's going in a different direction. Let me see, what else have we got here? I'm going to come on to Red Bull and their drivers and potential replacements for Honda in a moment. Anyone got anything more to say about Honda's decision? Because lots of people have messaged me saying this is ridiculous. Honda, I mean, some of you saying I agree with Honda. Lots of people saying that, you know, this is not the first time, of course, that Honda have dipped a toe into Formula One but then backed out of it. And that's absolutely true, but they've got to look after themselves. Their main primary interest isn't the future of Formula One, it's the future of Honda Motor Company. So they have to do what's right for them. And also, let's not forget, aside from any of these environmental concerns, the automotive industry, like many industries, are going through a massive difficult phase right now. You know, 2020, but even before that, has crippled the automotive industry in many ways. So they will be suffering. So of course they've got to look at some of their most expensive investment arms and think about cutting those back. So yes, I can see many reasons why what Honda have said makes a lot of sense. Sad to see them leave, says Online Goldmine. I agree. I'm very sad to see them leave. I think it's a sad day for Formula One. If you saw my video that I put out immediately after that announcement on Friday morning, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's a very sad moment for Honda because it has been great to have them in the sport. They've gone through so many ups and downs, and yet they've stuck at it and finally got some success. And now, you know, they've decided to pull out off the back of that, which is a real shame. But it's also a real shame for Formula One because, of course, we've just lost 25% of our engine supply to the sport. You know, one of only four power unit manufacturers. So that's a real shame. How can they justify continuing in F1? Well, they can't, which is why they're pulling out. Would they think differently if they were winning, says Ren T. Good point. Yes, they probably would, wouldn't they? And they'd probably think about pulling something else instead, maybe IndyCar. You know, but if they were winning in Formula One, as I said before, there's another set of massive benefits that come with that. You know, you will absolutely sell more cars, more Honda road cars, if you're the dominant force in Formula One. Just ask Mercedes. So it would have been different. But this isn't a case of, well, we can't win, so we're running away. This is a kind of a sad indictment on Formula One to some extent, isn't it? Because they don't see an opportunity to start winning in Formula One over the next few years. These power units are locked in, which means, to a large extent, Mercedes' dominance is locked in. To, you know, at least their advantage is locked in. And that means, because of the way the rules are written in Formula One, those trying to catch up would have to spend a huge amount of money in the short term as the rules get more and more restrictive in this power unit sense towards 2025 when they're phased out, which means there's very little opportunity to take giant leaps forward. So that's just another reason why you could see that Honda would make this decision. Looks like McLaren dodged a bullet if they were Honda. I mean, possibly. Real concerns for F1 right now. Big meetings between FIA and teams need to happen. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they are happening. Let me see. Red Bull should buy the rights to the Honda engine and find another supplier like Cosworth. Richard Marshall. Right, let's move it on then, because Richard, you were not the only one to suggest such a thing. Let me just find my questions again. We have got here a number of suggestions from you guys, including what Richard just said. I'll come through all of these in various question form and we'll discuss each one as we go. But there's so many solutions or potential solutions that could come out of this. Some could be great, some might not be so great, but there's a real tipping point here for both Red Bull and to some extent for Formula One. So let's look at what some of the questions that came in here. Teo says, yeah, I've had another brainwave. Could Honda's 2021 engine, so next year's engine, Honda's final engine, become an open source engine in 2022? So any team could use it as their baseline engine to develop from, however they want. Red Bull or McLaren, for example. So there's a possibility. The Honda power unit, as it finishes 2021, when Honda back out, could they open that up, open source it, and make the designs open to someone else to take it on board? The answer to that is yes, they could do that. What would be the point of somebody coming in to take that on? So the problem that you still have, even if you handed over all of the designs in an open source fashion to everybody in Formula One, the problem that you have is the same problem that Honda have, and the reason they're pulling out, because it's so expensive to try and develop that engine to a point where you might have a chance of challenging for race wins or challenging at the front. As the rules become even more prescriptive, I mean, let's not forget, from 2023, there's no development allowed on the power units as they start to phase them out. So you have a finite window in which you can actually develop that power unit into something greater than it already is, at huge cost, let's not forget, for an organisation that's trying to catch up the incumbent manufacturers that have already been running these things for years and have huge experience. So who would it suit? Would it really suit somebody to come along and take that open source design and use it for their own benefit? I don't think so. Let's see what you're saying on this. Honda will not share their engine design. I mean, I also think that's probably a thing. Honda will not just give up the engine design to anybody. They may well be able to do a deal with Red Bull because they have a relationship, but would they just open it out to the world? I'm not sure, because actually some of the things, of course, that are contained within that F1 development program are still at the forefront, or certainly intrinsic in their road car design around things like MGUs and that kind of thing. Could Porsche buy the Honda engine and enter F1? Well, for the same reason, I don't think so. Why would Porsche want to come in at this very late stage of these V6 hybrid power units? I mean, we're at the closing end of this period of time in Formula One. We've got a couple of years left of these power units, that's it. So it makes no sense for a manufacturer like that to come in at this point, and there's no way you'd catch up with a Mercedes having come in from scratch like that. And then by the time we get to 2025, we've got a whole new power unit coming anyway. So I can't see that happening. What if Red Bull Honda win the 2021 championship, says Craig O'Brien? Well, look, there's nothing really to say that couldn't happen. And I don't buy the idea that Honda are just going to give up from here on in. I do believe that, you know, they're a proud organisation, Honda. They will want to go out on a high. They've already achieved great things, and they will already have a development programme for that power unit within the restrictions that they have. They will have already had that phased in right through till 2023. So they'll have a development specification already lined up and still be working on that. So I think they'll be bringing a new engine for next year as they are allowed to. I think they'll be bringing new components and new updates to that within the restrictions. I can't see them giving up. And if Red Bull can deliver a great car next year, why couldn't they be champions? It's not out of the question. Let me see. Did Porsche not build a hybrid F1 engine anyway, says Robert Chu. They built a single-cylinder test engine when they were seriously thinking about coming into Formula One. But the fact they didn't come into Formula One probably tells you everything that you need to know, because them, as a big giant, automotive giant like that, went through all the trouble of designing and building a single-cylinder test engine, and they were part of the rules discussions, and yet when these power units were introduced, they went in a different direction to the direction that Porsche and others wanted to go in, and they decided it wasn't for them, so they pulled out. So, you know, whatever we think of these hybrid power units that we've got in the sport right now, amazing technology, amazing achievement, I'm not sure they've been a successful project from Formula One. I don't even think we've marketed enough off the back of the amazing technology. I don't think we've shouted about it enough to celebrate the achievements we've made. So I don't think this era, I mean, let me know, I don't think this era of power unit design is going to go down as much of a success when we look back at it in history, in my opinion. Lots of people hate the loss of noise. You know, it's obviously been dominated by one team. That's not necessarily the fault of the power unit, but they haven't really ticked all the right boxes, have they? So the next version, whatever that ends up being, has to try and tick the boxes we didn't tick with this one. Right, let me see what else have we got. Oh, there's a good one. Echo phone. Will stock engines be the solution? So I think, did somebody else ask me that one? No, so that was kind of a good point there. Will stock engines be that? Can everyone have a standard engine? So that's a possibility. If we're looking at the big picture of Formula One into the future, can Formula One do away with the race around power units? Forget that technological race of developing those and have a standard power unit that everyone uses. I mean, somebody said to me the other day, could everybody just have a Merc? You know, great engine, brilliant, bulletproof, just wonderful, class leading. Could everyone just have one? I mean, they could, if Merc can supply them if they want to. But what happens then is you're almost certainly going to lose the other big automotive manufacturers, because Renault are not going to want to race with a Mercedes. Ferrari are not going to want to race with a Mercedes. We've already lost Honda. So if you do that, there's nothing wrong with doing that. And actually, it could be brilliant doing that and going in the direction of that. But actually, we've got to make a decision then to not rely on or not need the automotive sector to be the group of companies that bankroll our sport. At the moment, that's exactly what they do. That's why we need them, because they've got huge resources, or they have done over the last few years. They're ploughing them into Formula One. You know, before that, we had the tobacco era bankrolling the sport, and we've had tech industries and communications companies. And if we start to look to a new industry, then maybe an emerging industry that's coming out of 2020 in good shape, because there are some. Maybe one of those industries could start to take on Formula One as a marketing opportunity. Well, then you don't need to worry too much about road car relevance. And you could have any power unit you like and have cars that are much closer and focus the areas of development on things like, you know, futuristic material science or aerodynamics or suspension or whatever we decide is most important for us to focus on. So yes, that's a possibility. I think it's a long way off, and it's taking Formula One in a very, very different direction, which means some big, big decisions would have to happen for that to be the case. Let me see. Richard Marshall, again, says Renault have to supply Red Bull if they can't find a solution. That's also very true. The sporting regulations state that if a team needs an engine, the power unit supplier that's supplying least other teams, and that, of course, is Renault, because from next year they'll only be supplying themselves, have to provide a power unit supply to that team, providing they get enough notice. And there are certainly certain deadlines written into that. So if Red Bull wanted a Renault power unit, they would have to request that from Renault, I think some point in the early part of next year. So in 2020, I think it's around about March time, April, somewhere like that, they have to announce or have to go to Renault officially and put in an official request for a power unit. And at that point, Renault would have to oblige and supply one. There are a number of things with that. Renault, I'm sure, would do it. And I think I've already said they would do it, because next year they've got one team, just two cars running around with that power unit, which means development is massively restricted because of the number of miles you're getting on each unit. You just simply can't find the problems or the potential advantages when you've only got two cars running around. Mercedes will have 4 teams running around, 8 cars worth of power units being cycled through. The amount of mileage they will get, amount of data they will get is massive. So Renault, there's an advantage to Renault being able to do that, because it can provide them with an advantage in terms of their development and, of course, finance. But there's this relationship breakdown, isn't there? I don't think that would stop them, obliging within the rules. But do Red Bull really want to go back to Renault cap in hand? I think Red Bull will be looking for an alternative solution. I'm just not sure yet whether there is one out there. Adam Elliott says, how many teams can an engine supplier supply? Well, that's kind of up to them. It depends on their own capacity. I mean, Mercedes are going to be supplying 4. I think they say that's pretty much maxed out within their own capacity. But if they wanted to supply the whole grid and there was a desire to do that, you just build a new factory and you hire more people and you increase your capacity to do it. So there's no rules on it. You could do whatever you want as long as there's agreement from everybody. Let me see, what else have we got here? Okay, I'll tell you what, let's move. Here we go. Mark, do you think F1's decision for the 2025 power unit will sort of be a do or die for them as a sport? That's a really good point. And I'm going to come on to that in more depth in a moment, but it's a massive decision that Formula One have to make about the next power unit. And it's not even just about the power unit. It's a bigger decision about the direction the sport's going in. As I said, about who is bankrolling the sport. Do we need to keep aligned with automotive manufacturers, or do we want to look for another industry to fund the sport? So huge decisions to make. And I don't think it will be do or die, because Formula One's big enough to survive. I mean, look at what we've survived at the moment with, one team dominating an entire era of the sport. The results are so one-sided that it's ridiculous, and yet Formula One is surviving. You can point to numbers dropping in various places. We've still got hundreds of millions of viewers around the world watching this sport. So it won't kill Formula One, but it is a crucial and critical decision, absolutely. Let me see. Right, I'm going to move on to the next question, because all related, but this one from Ben Bennett says, could Honda's departure be an opportunity for Toyota, Ford or VW to re-enter the sport? Now, I kind of touched on this already. I don't think that's related to Honda's departure. I think if Ford or Toyota or VW or Porsche or anybody else within those groups want to come into Formula One, first of all, things like cost caps, make are a solid move for the sport, because that makes it more attractive, of course. But 2025, as we said, is going to be the next opportunity. It makes no sense for any of those organisations to come in before that. For all the reasons I said, they can't catch up with Mercedes at this point. They'd have to spend a huge amount of money to even try to do it, and it would be pointless, particularly given that they've only got a couple of years. So what they will be doing, and manufacturers will already be in discussion with F1 about the shape of the next set of regulations, is looking at whether they want to come in. So a bit like Porsche did last time around with single-cylinder test engines, that kind of thing, looking at combustion processes, looking at architecture, being involved in those discussions. That will be happening, but there's no point in that happening in terms of coming into the competition until 2025. As you'll have seen, I'm sure, last week, in terms of coming in as a team, as a manufacturer, so as a works team, for example, unless you can take over an existing team entry into the sport, there's now an entry fee of $200 million, which will get spread out amongst all other entrants in the sport. That's a big amount of money to ask somebody just to get involved in the sport. And so there's nothing stopping a Ford or a Toyota coming in and buying an existing small team, a Haas or a Williams or somebody. Those things are absolutely possibilities, and it's actually raised the value of those smaller teams, because the alternative is to throw 200 million into the pot, which gains you nothing other than an entry. If you can buy a team for a nominal figure, particularly if they're a small team in debt, you're already in the sport and you've saved yourself that 200 million. So coming in as an engine supplier is perhaps a bigger opportunity when the rules change in 2025 for some of those organisations that you have mentioned. Danielle Picconi says, I'm calling it now, BMW. Yeah, BMW as well. Any of these organisations will take a fresh look at Formula One when the new power units are decided upon, because let's face it, they haven't been decided on yet. They will have to be decided on very, very soon, because that process, as you can imagine, is a long drawn out process of getting to the point of racing these things in just a few years' time. Red Bull Ferrari, could be a Red Bull Ferrari, that's a possibility, but do you want a Ferrari power unit right now? Why are they keeping new teams out of the sport, says Echo Phone. They're not necessarily keeping them out. I mean, they are to some extent, I suppose. They say they've got enough teams in the sport right now, and you actually open yourselves up to a number of logistical challenges if you increase that number, just in terms of the amount of garages that are at each racetrack, minimising the amount of space then that existing teams have, because they have to share garage space along the pit lane. There's all those kind of things, but actually what they're trying to do, or what they say they're trying to do with this 200 million entry fee, is to weed out the teams that are not serious. And that might sound like a hefty way to do that, but there is some truth in that we've seen a number of teams come into the sport, be ill-prepared, and actually that can be a real negative for Formula One. So to have a major player like a Toyota, like a Ford, like a Porsche or somebody, they've got potentially 200 million if they're serious enough to do it. The truth is, though, I can't see anybody paying that to come into the sport when you could probably, for a lot less, just purchase a team and buy your way in that way. So it feels like it's almost a nominal figure that's just been put out there that's so big that nobody else is going to come in, because particularly with everything else that's going on in the sport, with the new regs coming in for 2022, then a new set of power units, the sport, Formula One itself, doesn't necessarily feel like it needs new teams to be finding their feet at this point. At some point they will, and it's a potentially dangerous game to play, because if a team drops out, if Red Bull decide to walk away, let's say, as another alternative to all this, and take two teams out of the sport, well, all of a sudden it doesn't look anywhere near as healthy as it did. So I think it's a dangerous game, but I do think that buying your way in through another team is probably what everybody will end up doing if they want to come into the sport. Right. There you go. In fact, Carinthe says, is F1 in danger if Red Bull pulls out? Well, it's not going to be in a healthy situation if Red Bull pulls out. And let's talk about that, because that's a possibility. Red Bull haven't made any announcements. What we do know is they haven't yet approached Renault. Renault have already said that. They haven't approached Honda about taking over the existing supply. Honda have already told us this. And yet, Helmut Marko and Dietrich Mateschitz have known about this Honda decision for some time. So what are they weighing up in the background? If they were 100% nailed on committed to staying in the sport, your absolute priority is to work out what your options are. So you'd go to Renault, you'd go to Honda, you might go to other organisations. You'd be discussing what the future is. But if they haven't made those approaches, maybe they're gathering information around all of this still, and they still have some time, of course, but there's got to be the possibility that Dietrich Mateschitz sees all of this as a huge investment for him. And, if Formula One is on this trajectory that might be going like this rather than like this, is it a time for him, with the amount of money he's ploughing into the sport, to start thinking about an exit strategy? I don't think that's what will happen, but you've got to consider that as an option. And I don't think, and to answer your question there, yes, Formula One would be in a much more difficult, much more unhealthy situation if two teams left the sport. Let me see. Do you think it's time for a new engine? Do you think it's time for a new engine in Formula One? Cheaper, less complicated and louder, says Stuart McGaw. Well, it is going to be time for a new engine, and we're getting a new engine. We know that, 2025. Should it be cheaper, less complicated and louder? Well, again, that will come back to that point I made earlier about who we want. Do we still want to remain aligned with the automotive industry? Because a cheap, loud, kind of aggressive engine, going back to a V8 or a V10, like so many people would love, could be great. We could put on a great show with that. But we've got to accept then that we're not going to be have any environmental message, unless we're talking about some massively eco fuel, and that's another side of this whole topic we'll get to in a moment. We're not going to be environmental. Maybe we're not going to be aligned to the automotive industry anymore, but we could put on a great show, and if we've got 10, 12 great teams with great drivers, all running this loud, gas-guzzling, screaming V8 or V10 engine, it could be amazing. But how long is it sustainable for? Who is going to bankroll it if it's not the automotive sector? So big decisions that have got to come Formula One's way over the next few years. Cosmos 2017, Formula E takes over Formula One. Can't see that happening. Now, there is another option, of course, another possibility, looking at Formula One's future, that Formula One and Formula E merge, or Formula One takes over Formula E. I'm sure you all know that Formula E has this really lengthy exclusivity to be the only FIA single-seater fully electric championship. So Formula One, even if it wanted to, and I don't think it does, couldn't go fully electric for a long way into the future. I don't personally think that electric is the way that F1 should go or will go. I don't even think it's the way that the automotive industry is committed fully to going, because it's simply not the right solution for everybody who needs a car. We know that. So that brings us on then to the next question, which is this one from Perrin Williams. How would you attract more engine suppliers to be relevant and competitive to all? So there's a good one to get our teeth stuck into. And And again, there's still this split. So if we want engine manufacturers to be from the automotive sector, which of course mostly that's what they would have to be, unless you start going down the route of independents like a Cosworth or a Judd or a Mugen or whatever, independent organisations that could build a very fast engine based on something from another manufacturer. Absolutely, we could go that route. Like I just said, if we want to disassociate ourselves from the automotive industry, we could do that. And I'm sure loads of you would love to see that happen. I can see a huge opportunity in doing that further down the line. And it could even be some way ecological through eco-fuels and whatever else. So there's definitely opportunity there. The other is, you say, we are going to remain aligned to the automotive sector. And that's what I think, to answer your question there, Perrin, I think the next version of Formula One's power units, I don't think Formula One can be brave enough at this point to kiss goodbye to the automotive sector, because we don't have another industry ready to step in and bankroll the sport at a time when we need people bankrolling our sport massively. So we have to, if you take that argument, to align ourselves with automotive, and that means we've got to either increase the hybrid side of what we do, so make that an even bigger priority, minimise the internal combustion engine maybe, and expand the hybrid side. We could maybe go hybrid on front and rear axles. There's loads of things that we could do that could be brilliant. The other is to go through an eco-fuel route, which Formula One, we already have some biofuels, bio components in our fuels. I think it's around 6% right now. Next year, actually, we increase that. So next year's F1 fuels, I think, have to go to 10% bio components. And then eventually the goal is to try and make that fuel entirely sustainable. And that could be either through some kind of biofuel, or it could be a completely different route with something like hydrogen. I can see lots of you talking about hydrogen combustion. Could be a really interesting area for Formula One. It's actually an area that I would love to see Formula One take hold of. It's still at a really early phase in its development, but if Formula One could take hold of it and develop it the way we have done with the current internal combustion and hybrid power units, we could then as an industry be at the forefront of the development of that technology that could be massive, because it could put Formula One right back on the map in terms of being leaders in tech design and innovation, and it could be massively aligned to the automotive sector. Because if Formula One can unlock the key to hydrogen combustion, and there are loads of problems, I know there's loads of problems, it's not, if there weren't loads of problems we'd all be driving around with it, but that's what Formula One's great at, overcoming problems, finding solutions to challenges. So put the world's best engineers that we have in Formula One on a topic like that, you'd be amazed how we would find solutions. I think the problem we might have is that Formula One may have left that too late to achieve by 2025. I'd love to see it, and I think that's a really good solution and a great way, Perrin, to attract new manufacturers. Because if you say, look, come to Formula One where we will be developing a fuel that can unlock the key to your business for the future, a hydrogen powered road car that can be filled up at a pump, doesn't need this infrastructure of electric vehicle charging that clearly doesn't work for everybody. Could we even convert existing cars on the road to some kind of hydrogen combustion situation, given the technology we could develop in Formula One? So I'm excited by that. I'd love to see it. I do, as I say, I wonder if Formula One have left that transition too late to introduce at this next phase, and actually whether that might have to be the one beyond that, by which point we could be too late. So I don't know. I think it'd be interesting. I'm really interested to see which way it goes. Big decisions to make, and I'm going to be fascinated to watch which direction they go. Pat Simmons is the man leading that side of things for Formula One, and he has a team that I know have been working for a couple of years now, very hard behind the scenes with the manufacturers to try and find these solutions. But it feels like it's run on and on and on, and we should actually already be having people working on this. Let me see. Yeah, so many positives around hydrogen if you can make it work. But yes, as lots of you are saying, hydrogen storage is a problem, absolutely. The cost of hydrogen stations, expensive, absolutely. There are so many issues in terms of pressure in the pre-chamber, hydrogen combustion engine, absolutely loads of things. But look, give those challenges and those problems to the Formula One engineers. They will find solutions. Of course they will. That's what they do. Anyway, there we go. Solar to F1, 1 lap a day, says John Norris. Solar some way off. Right, let me see what else I've got here, because I've got another one. Oh, in fact, Andrew Leese talks about hydrogen. Hi Mark, great job. If we saw an emergence of a new power source like hydrogen for the 2025 season, would you expect potential engine manufacturers to be plentiful? Yeah, I should have brought your question up, Andrew, sorry, before I went on to that whole spiel that I've just done. But yes, as I said, absolutely, I could see that being incredibly attractive to the automotive industry. You know, the automotive sector is notoriously very slow at developing stuff and developing technology. They are the huge shipping container in that analogy, where if you want to change direction, it takes forever to turn this giant ship. Where Formula One, we can zigzag all over the place because we're dynamic, we can react to stuff, we can preempt stuff, and we can do things very quickly. So if we give the automotive sector the opportunity to join this really fast, really high-end, massive opportunity of developing something like hydrogen combustion in the world of Formula One, massively attractive to those people, because that's an opportunity they just simply can't have in the real world, if you like. And because we would be ahead of the curve, if you like, in terms of the road car industry, it's a potential game changer for all of their organisations. So people like Honda would be considering coming back into Formula One. So yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity. I really hope that we get somewhere with that, because I think I'm really intrigued to find out when we get a decision on it and what that decision is, because I think it'd have massive ramifications for those who are already involved in the sport, but also, as you're all saying, those who are not yet in the sport, but we could potentially attract into it. Here we go with the Bottas jibes off and running. Well done. Right, let's have your thoughts on all of this. And I've got a couple of other questions that are not related to the Red Bull Honda situation. I think a couple of people asked me about what implications this could have on Max Verstappen. So let's pick that up while I find some more questions from you guys. Keep them coming. Could Max Verstappen, could this decision by Honda activate some get-out clause or break clause for Max Verstappen? We know he's in a longer-term contract, but could he decide he wants to get out of Red Bull because what he signed up to is no longer there, and whatever he sees as the next phase, whether it's a Renault or something else, he may not see that as a championship contending opportunity and might want to jump ship. That's a very real possibility, and something that Red Bull will be hugely mindful of. So where could he go? Well, where do you go if you want to win a championship in Formula One? The obvious place would be Mercedes. So that's 2022 we're talking about, isn't it? How long's Lewis Hamilton going to sign a contract for at Mercedes? We think it's going to be a 3-year contract, if indeed he ever actually signs it, which would take him through 2021, of course, and then 2 years of the new regulations, 22 and 23. I wonder if there could be an opportunity to slot Max Verstappen into a Mercedes at some point. But then again, after we get to 2022 and the brand new cars and brand new regulations, there's nothing actually to say that either Mercedes would still be in the sport. That's one thing. And secondly, will they still be as dominant as they are today, given that we've had a bit of a reset and there's an opportunity for pretty much everybody. So let's perhaps have some of that discussion on Max. Max to Haas in 2022. Let me see. Max to Renault with Alonso. Oh, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Oh, can you imagine Fernando Alonso and Max Verstappen in the same team? It'd be fireworks. You thought Lewis and Fernando were bad back in 2007. That'd be brilliant. I'd love to see that. Max or Russell at Merc. Yeah, see, that's the thing, isn't it, with Mercedes, while we're on that quick subject. We've got George Russell, who I think everybody sees huge potential in, and I think most people see as the potential successor to Lewis Hamilton, providing he keeps going on the trajectory that he's on right now, I guess. But he's unproven at that top level, whereas Max isn't. Max is a ready-made championship contender. So you could have Max and George, couldn't you? Because there's nothing stopping you, you know, I'm going to trigger a bunch of Bottas comments here, but there's nothing stopping you binning off Bottas and bringing in George Russell alongside Max. There's a dream lineup potentially. Max to McLaren. I mean, this is the thing. He could go anywhere, couldn't he? If that's an opportunity, if he decides that Red Bull isn't going to offer him the future that he wants, I mean, everybody will be scrambling over themselves to get hold of Max, wouldn't they? That opportunity doesn't come up very often, so that would be a big one. Let me see, what else have we got here? Yeah, if I'm Lewis Hamilton, I'm enjoying the money pile up the longer I wait, says Great UK. Yeah, I mean, this whole delay in Lewis getting around to signing a contract, I can't help feeling there's a bit more to it than just piling on the money. I'm not sure Lewis is squabbling over a couple of million here or there. I think there's a bit more to this about the future of the team, about the future of Toto. I can't help but feel, and I've got nothing to back that up, that's just a hunch, that there's a little bit more going on behind the scenes. Anyway, that's just my theory. We'll see what happens. He'll probably go and sign a contract tomorrow and prove me wrong. Right, let me see, what else have we got then? Max to Aston Martin. Let me see. Deliveroo. Bottas to Deliveroo. Here we go. Alcohol fuel wouldn't work. I've read your book. What mechanics get up to? Yeah, that's massive drums of alcohol in the back of the garage. Yeah, wouldn't work. Wouldn't have worked when I was there anyway. Hydrogen fuel cell is the future. Toyota already has a production model on this technology. Well, so fuel cell tech is another, as Honda even mentioned in their statement, that's a direction that the automotive industry is putting a lot of research into. You're right, Honda have been definitely behind that. But actually there's a number of other tech solutions around hydrogen as well as the fuel cell, which has its own issues. Like I said, hydrogen combustion engines is another area, really interesting area. So hydrogen is a real intriguing possibility in so many ways. We just haven't unlocked its potential properly in the automotive sector, but I've no doubt we will, and Formula One could be at the centre of unlocking that. That's my point. Moonshine engines. Use chip fat oil, yeah. Koenigsegg engine, yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it? That's a cool engine. Have you seen that? That's amazing. That's a story for another day, though. Maybe we'll get into some of that tech. That's brilliant stuff. I was reading about it recently. I'd love to get my hands on one of those. Right, let me see. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go through, here we go, Varun Sambi. I think this is the kind of challenge that Andy Cowell is best for. Let's just quickly pick up on that. Andy Cowell, of course, the class-leading engine guru, is available, and Red Bull do need a power unit. So there is this thought process that says they pick up what Honda leave off in 2021 and bring in somebody like Andy Cowell to lead that charge. And that's a very real possibility. It also could tie in with the fact that Red Bull, because they're one of the top teams, have to relocate or redeploy some of their workforce. Maybe that could be part of that restructuring process as well. So there's a lot of plus sides to doing that. I just think the investment from a Red Bull perspective is huge, and yet what do they actually get out of it over and above what they already get out of it, apart from a power unit, which they won't have? But is it worth them ploughing many, many millions into becoming their own engine supplier? I'm not sure they get anything back from that, really. So that's, I think it's an unlikely scenario, but definitely one that's being discussed right now. Right, what we got here, 10 minutes to go. I just want to pick up the last couple of questions that you guys have sent me, which are unrelated to the Honda thing. So we'll drop this. You can keep the questions coming. I'll try and pick some up if we've got time at the end. But let's get this one from Grumpy Toffee, talking about this weekend at the Nürburgring. With the weather looking rather chilly this weekend, will Marc have a big advantage with the DAS system for warming the front tyres? And yes, that is a huge potential this weekend, because this is going to be a cold weekend, a cold race. Could well be a wet weekend as well. The Nürburgring is a circuit at this time of year which is likely to be around 10 degrees or less. Now that will be the coldest race by far that we go to or have gone to over the course of this season. It's not the coldest temperatures we've ever run Formula One cars in, but it will be cold. And one of the biggest challenges will be getting heat into the tyres, particularly for things like a quali lap or restarting after a safety car or the start of a race. And absolutely, that's where your DAS system can really come into play. By moving the toe angle of the front tyres, you can scrub them to more than you normally would, which is a very inefficient way to drive your car. But scrubbing those tyres generates heat through them, so it is a very real possibility that could really come into its own this weekend, perhaps more so than at any other race maybe. So yes, very good point, and I absolutely think that will be a key feature of the Merc this weekend. And on a similar subject, Ray C says, besides snow, obviously, how cold is too cold to race F1 cars in? Is there a limit? There isn't really a limit. I mean, bear in mind that we have run Formula One cars in pre-season testing when there is snow all around the circuit. I mean, I've been in Barcelona where we've had to shovel snow, from out of the garage doors as soon as we open them. It's been that cold. The challenge with a Formula One car when it's that cold is actually getting it hot enough just to be able to start the engine. You can't start a Formula One engine, internal combustion engine up, when it's below a certain temperature, a certain threshold. And the reason for that is that they are designed with the right tolerances between components to be at their right tolerance when it's at operating temperature, which is high, of course, massive. So what we do is we plug in a heater, an engine heater, into the water system of the car. You'll come in the morning on the day of the car running, plug in an external heater, which just plugs with a quick detach into the onboard water system of the car, and then heats that and cycles through very, very hot water or fluid through your system. And gradually that starts to dissipate heat through the engine and it heats up. We've even used those industrial gas-powered, garage space heaters and pointed them at things like the gearbox and the engine to try and get a little bit of heat into the block, because you simply cannot even turn it over until it reaches a certain threshold. I think below something like 60 degrees, you couldn't even turn it over. You couldn't even turn it over to find oil pressure. So you've got to get that heat in. That's the biggest challenge. When it comes to running the cars on track, they of course generate their own heat. You close up all of the cooling ducts on the car to an extreme level. So that's easy. That's easy to overcome. Brake ducts as well. You could minimize the scoops to almost nothing. Tyres are one of the biggest issues, which is, like I said, where DAS can really play a role at certain times over the race weekend. But once you're up and running, yeah, it's not ideal, but it's going to be the same for everybody. And actually, you'll end up with very low grip, and it could be fantastic, particularly if we get a bit of rain. I'm really looking forward to the race this weekend because it's also a new circuit to most people. We haven't been there for a long time, so it's got to be treated like a new circuit. We haven't been able to get a lot of the drivers into simulators as they normally would in the build-up of these races, because you can't fly drivers around the world like you used to. You can't just fly into the UK from all around the world to do a day on the simulator, which would be normal practice for many of the drivers to come to their UK bases and spend the day, fly home again. But you can't do that. They're exempt from a lot of these quarantine restrictions, but only when they're coming back from a Grand Prix, not outside of those event restrictions. So there's so many variables going into the weekend. I think it could be actually really, really good. And I'm really looking forward to it for that reason. But Ray, to answer your question, it's not too cold. It's not ideal, but when it's the same for everybody, it could actually be a really great addition to the show, because Formula One cars and Formula One tyres are not designed to operate in those temperatures, which means they'll be suboptimal. And that means we can get mistakes happening. We'll get some people just creeping into the tyre window, others just falling out of it, and that will create a variable performance level on track too. So I think there could be some really good things to look forward to. Can't they bring simulators? Yeah, so all the drivers, I'm sure, most of the drivers have a home simulator to learn the track. I'm not talking about just learning which way the corners go. I'm talking about working with the team on the very advanced simulator that they have at the factory, where we're learning about things like, the very advanced tyre model that they have, and learning how these tyres will work in these temperatures, what changes you can make on a car to set the thing up for this particular circuit. It's those things that lots of teams haven't had the opportunity to do like they normally would. Right. Hey Mark, can F1 use two-stroke hybrids without the pollution by using efficient ethanol or biofuels? Yes, they can, and that's another area actually that I've talked about. I made a video about it a while back, that Formula One have absolutely been assessing two-stroke as an option, as an architecture to again use, as an opportunity for Formula One to lead on that kind of development front. But two-stroke is an area that still has huge potential. It's an untapped, or it's not fulfilled the potential of that technology. So there's an opportunity to grow it with Formula One's engineers. But I just feel like we've got to be at the cutting edge. So hydrogen would be a bit more advanced in my opinion. Let me see. Could it actually help any team? If you mean the cold, could it help any team? Well, possibly Mercedes, I'm sad to say, because of the fact they have DAS, and that will overcome some of the challenges that the cold weather will be facing on tyres. Let me see what else we've got, because we've got 5 minutes to go. I'm out of questions, I think. Yeah, I'm out of questions on here. So let's see what you guys are chatting about. Holy Moses, I'm late again, says Jan Ubernak. Hi Jan, welcome along. You are a bit late, but that's fine. You can always catch up. Cold air has a higher density. In theory, would you have more power in the cold, I believe, says Eric. Well, you'd think that. You would have done pre-turbo era. So in the old normally aspirated engines, absolutely, it was about cramming as much air through that scoop above the driver's head. And in cold conditions, that's absolutely what you got. Of course, with the turbo power units that we have now, it's the turbo that forces the air in. So you can actually compensate for air density with your turbo. So it's not necessarily the same as it used to be. Robert Shue, if you were Christian Horner, Mark, what would you do? So there's an interesting thing. What would any of us do? And actually, there's a point on this, that Christian Horner, I read, and I don't know if this is true, but Christian Horner wasn't aware, as far as I understand, of the Honda's decision until it came last week. Whereas Dietrich Mateschitz and Helmut Marko were aware of it much earlier than that. So they say, or so I read in a report. I thought that was quite interesting and that almost to me feeds into this decision of this being a much bigger decision about the future of Red Bull's participation. And I don't just mean pulling out, but is this going to be Red Bull pulling out? Is this the end of Red Bull in Formula One? Or is it Dietrich having to make a massive decision about doubling up on his contribution to the sport and building their own engines or funding their own engine suppliers, something like that? So if I was Christian Horner, first of all, I'd be slightly miffed that I wasn't part of those conversations with the two bigwigs. What would I do? For me, I think I'd take a Renault. I'd swallow my pride, I'd go back to Cyril, cap in hand, and say, I didn't mean it, mate. Can we please have an engine? Here's a bunch of cash. A Renault power unit is not the worst thing to have in the world, and actually it just gives a little bit of stability in that it's a proven unit. You go with something new, you've got a whole load of risk attached to it until we get to 2025, and then they can do whatever they want with the next set of regulations. So difficult choice, difficult decision for Red Bull, but a big one. Let me see. They've signed the Concord agreement, so how would they pull out? Well, so that's Marco Louis. I think we'll finish on this one. Red Bull can pull out of Formula One, even though they've signed the Concord agreement. There is an exit, a break clause that can be activated at the end of every season. So Red Bull have the opportunity, if they want to walk away from the sport, despite signing the agreement. But that's a big decision. That's a huge, huge decision. They've put so much into this and they've got so much out of it. There's still a huge amount from Red Bull to extract from their Formula One program. They are very marketable. They've excelled in a marketing sense. They are still, streaks ahead in terms of things like pit stops. All of this stuff they can celebrate and champion, and they do very well. They're still winning the occasional race. So from that perspective, they are the next best team that could potentially challenge the might of Mercedes. That's a really strong position in this current world of Formula One to be in. So to give up on all of that would be a major, major decision. Not one they couldn't take, but a major decision nonetheless. Right, guys, it's 10 o'clock. That flew by tonight, didn't it? I mean, it did for me anyway. It's flown by. Thank you so much for all your questions coming in. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the time that you guys put into this, totally. It's a really mega discussion that we have on here. I really enjoy it. Keep it coming. I will try and come back to you. It's actually my birthday tomorrow, so don't expect too much on the channel from me tomorrow. But back on Wednesday, I'll be back with all sorts of stuff that I haven't even decided yet. Unless there's some breaking news, then I might have to cover it. But there we go. Have a great week, folks. And as I say, thanks again. I will see you all very, very soon. Ta-da.